They called him the weird old man and laughed when he told them to respect the neighborhood. The teenage punks who broke into his house at 2 a.m. thought they were targeting an easy victim. They had no idea they'd just invaded the home of a decorated Army Ranger who'd spent 30 years perfecting the art of neutralizing threats in the dark. Welcome to Stories from Us. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden warriors and home protection, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These moments matter more than you know. William Bill Stone had been living quietly in his modest single-story home on Maple Street for 3 years, following the same precise routine that had governed his life for decades. At 65, he was a gray-haired widower who lived alone but maintained his property with military precision. Every morning at 6 a.m., he would water his garden and raise the American flag on the pole in his front yard, and every evening at sunset, he would lower it with the same ceremonial care he'd learned in the service. To his neighbors, Bill was a quiet but somewhat cantankerous man who kept to himself and seemed to get upset about small things. Trash left on sidewalks, loud music after 10 p.m., teenagers who didn't show proper respect for the neighborhood's elderly residents. He was polite when spoken to but never initiated conversations, and his social interactions were limited to nodding hello and occasionally calling the police about noise complaints or suspicious activity. The neighborhood's younger residents had a very different view of Bill Stone. To them, he was simply the grumpy old guy who constantly complained about their activities and seemed determined to ruin their fun. A group of 4 young men between the ages of 18 and 22, Tyler, Marcus, Jake, and Danny, had made Bill a particular target of their mockery and harassment over the past several months. "Hey, old man, you running a military academy over there with all those flag ceremonies?" Tyler would shout across the street, usually loud enough for other neighbors to hear. "Maybe he's got little plastic soldiers lined up inside, playing war games," Marcus would add, triggering laughter from the group. "Probably polishes his medals all day and tells stories about the good old days," Jake would contribute, making exaggerated saluting gestures. Bill never responded to their taunts. He would simply continue with whatever task he was performing, whether it was maintaining his garden, checking his mailbox, or bringing in groceries. But his eyes were always watchful, always scanning the environment with the kind of automatic vigilance that becomes second nature to someone who has spent decades in situations where inattention could prove fatal. What these young men couldn't have known, what none of the neighbors understood, was that William Stone had served 30 years as a United States Army Ranger, rising to the rank of Master Sergeant in the elite 75th Ranger Regiment. He had participated in special operations across multiple theaters of conflict, including classified missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and several other locations that would never appear in his official service record. Bill's specialty had been close-quarters battle and nighttime operations. He was an expert in what the military called direct action, the kind of missions where Rangers moved silently through hostile territory to capture or eliminate high-value targets with precision and minimal collateral damage. His training included advanced techniques in hand-to-hand combat, weapons disarmament, tactical movement in confined spaces, and the psychological aspects of controlling hostile subjects without unnecessary violence. His retirement from the Army hadn't been forced by injury or disciplinary action. It had been his choice after his wife Margaret died of cancer. They had never had children, and Bill found that military life without the anchor of family had lost much of its meaning. He'd chosen to settle in a quiet suburban neighborhood where he could live peacefully and maintain the disciplined lifestyle that had sustained him through 3 decades of service. But the instincts and skills of a career special operations soldier don't simply disappear with retirement. Bill's morning and evening flag ceremonies weren't just patriotic gestures. They were reconnaissance missions that allowed him to observe his neighborhood, catalog changes in routine, and identify potential security concerns. His complaints about noise and suspicious activity weren't the grumblings of a cranky retiree. They were the observations of someone trained to detect threats before they materialized into actual dangers. Maple Street had experienced a troubling increase in criminal activity over the past 6 months. There had been several attempted break-ins, car thefts, and incidents of vandalism that had prompted the local police department to increase patrols in the area. The crimes seemed to be the work of the young offenders who understood how to avoid detection. They targeted houses when residents were away, chose vehicles that wouldn't be missed immediately, and conducted their activities during hours when most people were asleep. Bill had been tracking these incidents with the systematic approach of someone trained in intelligence gathering. He maintained written logs of unusual activities, took note of unfamiliar vehicles that appeared in the neighborhood repeatedly, and documented patterns of behavior that suggested organized criminal activity rather than random opportunistic crimes. Tyler and his 3 friends were not just innocent neighborhood troublemakers. They were the primary perpetrators of the criminal activity that had been plaguing Maple Street. They had developed what they considered a sophisticated operation, carefully observing potential targets, planning their activities during low-risk time periods, and maintaining enough distance between incidents to avoid establishing clear patterns that might attract serious police attention. Their increasing boldness had been encouraged by their success in avoiding consequences, but Bill's frequent calls to police had resulted in increased patrols that made their operations more difficult and risky. The 4 young men had begun to view Bill as a serious obstacle to their criminal enterprise, and their public mockery of him was motivated as much by genuine anger as by teenage bravado. "That old bastard is ruining everything for us," Tyler complained during one of their planning sessions. "Every time we try to set something up, the cops show up because he's called in some bullshit complaint." "We need to teach him a lesson," Marcus suggested. "Show him what happens when you mess with our business." "He's old, lives alone, probably got some money and valuables," Jake added. "Easy target. We go in, take what we want, and leave him a message about minding his own business." Danny, who had been conducting surveillance on various neighborhood targets, had specific intelligence about Bill's house. "I've been watching his place for weeks. He goes to bed every night at 10 o'clock, gets up every morning at 6 o'clock. No alarm system that I can see, just standard door and window locks. The side window by the kitchen has a broken latch that would be easy to force." The plan they developed was straightforward in its simplicity. They would wait until Friday night, when Bill was asleep, then enter through the damaged window and steal anything of value they could carry easily. More importantly, they would leave clear evidence of their presence and a written message warning Bill to stop interfering with neighborhood activities or face more serious consequences. On Friday night at 2 a.m., the 4 young men approached Bill's house with the confidence of criminals who had never faced serious resistance. Tyler used a pocket knife to jimmy the window latch. Danny climbed through first and unlocked the front door for the others, and all 4 entered the house wearing ski masks and carrying weapons, baseball bats and knives that they intended to use for intimidation rather than violence, since they believed they were dealing with a frail elderly man who would be too frightened to resist. But Bill Stone wasn't asleep. 30 years of military training had conditioned him to maintain what soldiers call combat sleep, a state of rest that allowed for instant awakening and immediate tactical response to threats. The first sound, the window being forced, had brought him to full alertness. The second sound, footsteps in his kitchen, had triggered his transition from civilian retiree to operational ranger. The third sound, whispered communications between the intruders, had provided him with intelligence about the number and location of hostile subjects in his home. Rather than confronting the intruders directly or calling for police assistance, Bill implemented the kind of tactical response that had made him successful in military operations. He treated his house as a battlefield, the intruders as enemy combatants, and himself as a single operator conducting a hostage rescue mission where the hostage was his own property and peace of mind. The 4 burglars had made the classic mistake of inexperienced criminals. They had separated to cover more ground quickly, assuming they faced no resistance. Tyler went to the living room to look for electronics and cash. Marcus headed toward what he assumed was the master bedroom, hoping to find jewelry or weapons. Jake positioned himself by the front door as a lookout, and Danny began checking the kitchen and dining area for small valuables. Bill observed their movements from the hallway, using techniques he had learned for moving silently through hostile territory. He could see that they were amateurs. No coordination, no communication discipline, no understanding of how to clear a building safely. Their separation made them vulnerable to the kind of individual neutralization tactics that rangers used when facing superior numbers in confined spaces. His first target was Jake, the lookout by the door. Bill approached using shadow and cover techniques that allowed him to move within striking distance without being detected. A sleeper hold applied with proper pressure, and timing rendered Jake unconscious in less than 5 seconds, and Bill secured his weapon before lowering him quietly to the floor. Danny, focused on rifling through kitchen drawers, never heard Bill's approach. A precisely applied pressure point strike to the base of his neck caused immediate but temporary paralysis, allowing Bill to disarm and restrain him without struggle or noise. Tyler was examining Bill's television and stereo equipment when he noticed the absence of his companions. He began to call out for them, but his voice was cut short when he turned to find a 65-year-old man standing behind him with the calm, controlled presence of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. The weapon Tyler had been carrying was in Bill's hands before Tyler fully understood what was happening. Marcus emerged from the bedroom to find his 3 friends on the floor and Bill Stone standing in the living room. But this wasn't the harmless old man they had been mocking for months. This was Master Sergeant William Stone in full tactical mode, and everything about his posture, expression, and movement spoke of lethal competence held in careful check. "Drop your weapon and get on the ground, face down, hands behind your back," Bill commanded in the voice he had once used to direct soldiers in combat zones. Marcus complied immediately, recognizing that he was facing someone whose authority came from places far more dangerous than civilian law enforcement. Bill secured all 4 intruders using zip-tie restraints that he kept readily available for exactly this type of situation. Old habits from a career spent in hostile territory where improvised detention of enemy personnel was a regular requirement. Only then did he call 911. 911 emergency. "This is 1247 Maple Street. I have 4 subjects who attempted breaking and entering, currently detained and secured." "Sir, are the subjects still in your home? Are you in immediate danger?" "Negative. All subjects secured and disarmed. I'm a retired Army Ranger. This situation is under control." Police arrived within 5 minutes to find 4 young men seated on Bill's living room floor, secured with professional restraints, none showing signs of injury, but all clearly in shock. A search of their persons revealed stolen property from previous burglaries, confirming that Bill had inadvertently broken up a crime spree that had been plaguing the neighborhood for months. "Mr. Stone," said the lead officer, "you subdued all 4 of these men by yourself?" "Yes, officer. They were amateurs operating in my area of expertise." The arrest of Tyler, Marcus, Jake, and Danny led to the recovery of stolen property worth thousands of dollars and the resolution of multiple unsolved cases in the area. All 4 were charged with breaking and entering, possession of stolen property, and carrying weapons during the commission of a felony. The story of the hero veteran who single-handedly stopped a neighborhood crime wave made local news within 24 hours. But Bill declined all interview requests and continued his normal routine as if nothing had changed. Morning flag ceremony at 6 a.m., evening flag ceremony at sunset, quiet maintenance of his property and observation of neighborhood activities. The only difference was in how others saw him. The teenagers who had once mocked him now crossed the street to avoid his attention. His neighbors, who had previously viewed him as a cranky old man, began greeting him with genuine respect and gratitude. Property values in the neighborhood increased as word spread that Maple Street was protected by someone with the skills and determination to handle threats that law enforcement might not detect until after damage was done. Bill Stone had never sought recognition or thanks for his military service, and he didn't seek them now for protecting his community. He simply continued living according to the principles that had guided him through 30 years of defending his country: vigilance, preparedness, and the willingness to act when action was necessary to protect innocent people from those who would do them harm. The teenagers who had once seen him as a target for mockery now understood that they lived under the protection of someone whose dedication to service hadn't ended with his retirement from the army. And the neighborhood of Maple Street learned that heroes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they simply raise the flag every morning and stand ready to defend what matters most. William Stone never needed a uniform to be a warrior, never needed orders to protect the innocent, and never needed recognition to know his duty. He found meaning in service itself, whether conducting special operations in hostile territory or defending his neighborhood from criminals who thought they could operate without consequences. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about what people do when everyone's watching. They're about what people do every single day when no one's paying attention, the quiet guardians who live among us, carrying skills and dedication we never think to ask about, ready to stand between good people and those who would harm them. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like William Stone? Someone whose quiet life concealed extraordinary training and the ability to protect others when it mattered most? Share their name in the comments. Tell us how they taught you that heroism comes in many forms, that protection doesn't always announce itself, and that the most important guardians are often the ones who serve without seeking recognition. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to help us honor the quiet protectors who deserve to be remembered. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, remember, the next time you see someone living quietly but staying alert, look a little closer. You might be living next to a guardian.